order this one. Which record company is it?
That was Harvest.
Harvest? Oh, right. They must have some of these left.
Oh, sure. Anyway, let's see. One interesting quote in this booklet from Triple Echo, where you observed about your role as a writer in the early days when you wrote things like Reeling, Squealing.
Yeah, feeling this.
And you said that you were sort of an observer who tried to send alarming messages to people, even to yourself. Does this still apply to your program?
I think it applies to anybody who writes, or anybody in the art world. Any kind of creativity is, you're trying to send messages, if not alarming, certainly something that will hopefully make people think or see in another way from, if they can only see it one way. You're trying to encourage people to look at things from a different perspective.
You also talked about it's not so much changing the world, but realizing one's own potential at first and then doing something else.
Yeah, that was my youth, my idealistic days. But I still believe that. I mean, basically that. I think that's what we all have to do. Because you can't change masses of people. So you have to teach by example. So first of all, you have to work on yourself before you can start showing a better example to other people. I'm not saying that I have succeeded in this, but I think it's back to the original question. I think the first duty or work of an artist is to make people see things differently, and not make as in force, but just by making it interesting enough so that people say, this is another way of looking at something or thinking about something.
Looking at the songs on the new CD, to me they seem to be very personal lyrics, and they also seem to be, an air of resignation in them. Is that something?
Well, both are correct. I mean, mostly my lyrics are painfully personal. I mean, that's why it's so difficult for me to sing them on stage, and why other people can't sing my songs, because it doesn't mean anything to them, you know. But resignation, as you get older, you get tireder, basically. I mean, the very fact that I am still writing songs and still saying things means that I haven't resigned yet.
It was just a feeling that came across in this piece that Q did on you. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I haven't.
They sort of started off with quoting. I haven't got it with me, unfortunately. They started off quoting from the first song from the new album. There's not much left to say, which is something expressed in.
Well, this is true. The human race has done just about everything in terms of words, stories, music, experiences. Now what we do is we repeat the same things. We're not getting anything new. So it becomes more and more new in the sense, what most people call new is a variation on the old way of doing something. It's not new, right? So it becomes more and more difficult to write, quote, new things. In fact, you should forget this word.
One quote from 73 album, Bananamour, was always very dear to my heart, which was, I said, I feel very happy as can be. She said, you're not happy, you're just stoned. Were you referring to specific states of being stoned?
Yeah. I mean, not one particular drug or another, or one particular thing. It's just, I think happiness is relative, is what I was trying to say. And what I was very amazed with, at that age, I was very young, was how you can change what you think is something that belongs to you, an emotion, chemically, and that all we are basically are chemical factories, you know. And if you push a little bit of this here or a bit of that there, it completely changes. So where do your values lie? What do you believe in? You know, what is really you, and what is what you have learned, or is just another chemical imbalance?
Actually, my first impression was you sometimes think you're happy while you're just being, I don't know, you imagine being happy, but you're not really being happy. And
it's going to be too loud. I think that whatever state you feel at any time is as real as anything else. Whether it continues is another question. But I've always argued this way that you know, whether you take a drug or a drink, or you don't, or whether you go jogging, it's just a chemical change. But the feeling you have is as valid for that moment as anything else.
This reminds me of a quote, which a wordplay in German, which you can't really translate into another language, which was by Siggy Jung, I think. He said, "Wirklich ist das, was wirkt," which means, translated, real is everything that has an effect.
Yes, exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, anything you feel is real. You know, it's there. You can't deny it. I mean, whether it's induced by a chemical reaction. Everything is induced by a chemical reaction, one way or the other. It's your emotions, your hormones, you know.
There must have been quite a change when David Allen arrived in England.
He was like one of the original hippies. I mean, he came from Australia with a philosophy that was later to be, not just him, but I mean, he was tuned into a philosophy that would later become the hippie philosophy, you know, peace and eat well and don't fuck other people, and you know, basically that's it. He was one of the early pioneers of that. Well, there were a lot of people took a lot of drugs in that time. They didn't take heroin in those days. They took drugs that were to advance, to expand their mental capacity. I mean, that was the idea of hallucinogens, and it was, you know, a trip meant a trip into your own mind. You know, find out about yourself and find out about, you know, the planet you live on and other people. I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's the right thing to do. I think more people should do it. I mean, I'm not saying you should do it necessarily with chemicals, but I mean, that should be everybody's ambition, to find out more, not just accept what there is. Basically, you take things, you know, apart from your normal food, because you just want to change the way you feel. You don't like the way you feel.
I don't know if you're aware of what the people from the record company put out, but they say, well, with a new record here, Kevin Ayers has found a new inner balance and a new optimism, which frankly, looking at the lyrics, didn't strike me as that.
They can't have read the lyrics, yeah. Optimism. No, what I have found is some encouragement to keep writing, keep making music, keep putting stuff out, because I've been sitting there on my ass for 5 years in Mallorca with no desire to communicate with anybody. I've been living the life of a recluse. But I'm certainly not, I mean, the lyrics are as cynical as ever. I mean, just because they don't sound very loud or there's not, you know, big heavy music behind it doesn't mean that the message has decreased.
Some part of this, maybe let's call it growing up, is reflected in the lyrics. If you say, well, there may not be too much to be said right now, but
at least I'm trying to say something. That's the basic underlying message of the record. And indeed the last one, Falling Up, is the same thing. But this new one, I had much more control over the production and the sound and the general presentation of the album, so I'm much happier with it. It's much closer to me, what I really want to do.
Does that actually mean that you record the stuff and the other guys decide, well, the drum sound has to sound like this because this is what's selling or whatever?
There used to be a certain element of that back in those days. I mean, the record company might say, we want more songs, we don't want any more psychedelic sounds, we want songs, or we want short songs or long songs, and there was that kind of pressure, but basically they didn't interfere too much. When I say control, what I really mean is involvement, to involve yourself in it, because I've done the last few you're talking about from the 80s, I wasn't really involved. It was because I had to make some money and people offered me money to do it, so I did it. But I'm not that proud of it. I think I wasted a lot of good material. I think there's some very good songs, but they just weren't done the right way.
Can you remember a special day when you said, oh, fucking hell, I'm no longer an adolescent?
Yeah, about 40. At least it took that long. I'm very lucky. About 40, I realized that it was all over. That was all over.
And can you describe some of the feelings that went with it, and if you transformed them into music or whatever?
No, I think the optimism that has been talked about, that I've retained, is the very fact of still making music. That's as optimistic as I can be, to still do something. Because as I said, for 5 years I've just sat on my ass, done nothing, scratched myself, and the lyrics of the new album. So another year goes by.
Yeah. Also in this Q interview, you mentioned that there were some close friends who sort of helped you financially if you were in a rut or whatever.
Well, yeah, I have been. And there have been some people who are lucky to have been born with a lot of money, and have also been generous enough to help me. They've been fans, they like the music, and they said, well, we have this money, so you can... Not the people who made the record, but other people apart from this. And so in the times when I haven't been working and I haven't had money, I've had some help. Not luxury level, but just to eat, and to live.
Another thing which strikes me about the music business is that, well, you would imagine that there are some royalties because the albums have been re-released.
Yeah, but I got so many bad deals that I signed when I was young. Soft machine stuff I don't get anything for. Peanuts. And these compilations are selling all over the world. Not millions, but they sell all the time. Every year they sell more, and I get nothing.
And what about your solo albums?
Even my solo albums, I signed such bad deals because I was optimistic in this. I believed in other people. I believed that what they told me was the truth. And they said, "This contract is wonderful, Kevin. Sign it," and I signed it. And now I find the difference.
Do you have any estimation as to how many copies of the albums were sold, say, of Joy with Toy or Shooting at the Moon?
No. But they keep reissuing them in compilations, and they sell. You can find them in the Philippines, you can find them in Australia and Fiji, and just a few. So they're things that keep selling, and hopefully will keep selling.
Do you mind if you skip back just to the beginning? You grew up in Malaya,
yeah.
But you were not born in Malaya.
No, I wasn't born there.
Where were you born
in England, yeah. But I spent the most important part of my childhood in Malaysia. So I have a very different view of life than, although I'm English, I don't relate to English. I don't relate to Northern European living at all. That's why I live in the Mediterranean now. That's the closest I can get without having to go to Asia. I like slow lifestyle, I don't like industrial cities. No, it's not my style.
Can you remember any particular incident from your youth in Malaya that, well, sort of made you feel comfortable in this environment?
The only thing I can remember about Malaya was that I was always very solitary. I used to spend nearly all the day on my own, by the sea, fishing or just... I never mixed with the other kids, and I had a great time. I never missed it. I mean, I really enjoyed being on my own. I mean, I wasn't intellectual then. I didn't even think, which is probably a good thing. That's a disease I learned later.
I noticed there was another quote from your new album, which...
doesn't pay to think.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean.
I'm stuck because that was one of the things I've been thinking about too. I mean, you can reflect so much about what you think you feel.
Well, it's useful. It's okay when I say it doesn't pay to think. I don't mean that it doesn't pay. I mean it doesn't. It's bad for your health, is what I mean. Especially when you can't reproduce, you can't make anything constructive out of. You. In Spanish, they have an expression called "comer coco," which means to eat your own brains.
You came back from Malaya to England at what age?
12. I was there from 6. And they put me straight into an English boarding school, which is like being put into prison, sentenced to prison.
These are the private schools where you had to wear a uniform.
Yeah, and they used to beat you all the time. I was born in Hernby.
Oh. Sorry.
I went back there because that's the area I knew, and that's where I met up with all those guys, and that's how we made Self Machine. It's a long story, it's a boring story, but that's what happened. I went back to Canterbury from London because I got into trouble in London, and they said you have to go to the country, so I did, and I met these guys, and blah blah blah.
So we skipped that part. The Wild Flower stuff, you were already putting Louis Massico poems to music. That's what's written in this...
Louis MacNeice.
Sorry, I got it wrong.
I know, you got it right. Louis MacNeice, yeah. I started music that way because I was a writer. I wrote poems. And in those days, you could sit in a pub and read your poetry, and people would listen to something. And they liked it to a certain point. But then I found if you just put 1 or 2 chords behind it with a guitar, or even 1 chord, 10 times as many people would be interested. So I thought this is the way to do it. And that's how I started the music.
The Wildflowers were playing R&B sort of stuff?
Yeah. Mostly R&B, soul, that was it.
Were you actually working as a waiter then when you were playing with the Wildflowers?
Just before. Yeah, I was doing all the jobs you do when you're young, working in building site, in the road, all the crappy jobs.
But then you got off to Majorca with David Allen. How did this come about?
Well, I met a lady who had quite a bit of money, and she took me there.
Was that in '66 before Soft Machine was founded?
Don't ask me dates. I have no memory of dates at all.
You stopped trying to sound American. You sang with your English accent. Was that a conscious move then? No, it wasn't. I think that we realized that we didn't sound. None of us could do. Robert could do it. He could sound like a almost American, like Mick Jagger sounds almost American. But if you sing, I have a sort of English BBC accent. If you try and sing rock and roll with that, it sounds like the Monty Python. So, no, but I think there was probably a deliberate, especially on my part, a decision not to try and sound American. For the production of the first single, you met Kim Fowley.
Oh yeah.
What was that story about?
Well, I don't know. Just met him, and he said, "We're going to make a single together." I think I was feeling really insecure.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was one of the most cynical people I've ever met in my life. He used to call the public, the record buying public, teenage bullshit. That's how he thought about the people. That's what he thought. He used to say, it's just teenage bullshit. Now you can do anything.
For some time, I used to have these romantic ideas about the 60s being about self-expression, trying to be generous.
There was a lot of that. It's exactly what it was. It was the 60s were, I don't know why we're talking about the 60s again, but it was a time, it was after the war, all these young people growing up and just saying, we want to change, we don't want to live like our parents lived, we don't want any more wars, we want to change the way you think, the way you eat, the way you dress or whatever, just change, but positive moves, not just criticism, actually, which was what happened with the punks. It was just saying we don't like this, but they didn't come up with any suggestion about what to do, which was the difference between hippie and punk, for me, anyway. Anyway, the 60s was that. It was about, suddenly, all these young kids left after the war. It's just saying we want to change the world, We want to change the world we live in for the better.
When you talked about changing things for the better, there was also this quote, or part of the lyrics to him, where he said, you just have to find out what it is that you want to be free from. Did you find out?
No. Well, I did, but there's no answer. I want to be free from metaphysical inquiry. I want to stop asking myself questions about eternity and origin and stuff like that. But there's no hope, so you have to live with that.
I was always interested in getting to know a bit of the chemistry a band works and the flow of musical ideas, how songs get pieced together or certain production ideas come about.
At that time, I was still enchanted with making records and making songs, and for me it was, the reason I called it Joy of a Toy was because I bought all these toy instruments from Woolworths, and the demonstration record I made of Joy of a Toy, which is better than the album, which I've lost, was all made on these cheap toy instruments, and I was just having fun, that's all.
To me there was always at least one track on the albums which sounded very experimental and seemed to present a very dark side of things, like Stop This Train and Let Me Out, or Song from the Bottom of a Well. But you seem to stop this venturing into,
Well, it's not so obvious now. And it's less, what do you mean by experimental is adventurous rather than experimental. I tend to try and be, especially with this last album, I played safe. Mainly because I don't feel, I like the album because I like sounds, I like acoustic music, I like the warmth of that, and I don't feel like doing that stuff anymore. Maybe I like to do it, but not on an album I put out as a song album. I just like songs, simple stuff. I still try and keep the message in the song, though. Something, strong.
Okay, thanks very much for the.
All right.